Just last month, he'd lost his appeal to avoid an electronic bracelet sentence in a separate case, opening day of Nicolas Sarkozy's Libya campaign financing trial. 3 of his former ministers also accused in Muammar Gaddafi's alleged bankrolling of Sarkozy's winning run for president back in 2007. Gaddafi would then be welcomed with full honors to Paris. Siobhan Silk has more.
He's already been convicted of influence peddling and on separate charges related to illegal campaign financing. But former French President Nicolas Sarkozy's time before the courts is not over. After a complex 10-year investigation, he's on trial again in perhaps his most serious case yet. He's accused of accepting 50 million euros in illegal campaign funds from then Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi for his successful 2007 presidential run.
At this stage in the case, we have the proof that a total of 6 million euros left Libyan public funds and entered France through the way of middlemen. These funds were quickly masked.
The claims first came to light in 2011 when a son of Gaddafi demanded that Sarkozy pay back the alleged funding. It's alleged he accepted the cash in exchange for agreeing to help whitewash Gaddafi's international reputation. Sarkozy has denied ever receiving any funds from Gaddafi.
He is contesting the accusation, which is grotesque. We don't even know the amount of this alleged financing. Depending on who you ask, it's 5, 6, 50 million, 400 million. We don't even know the currency.
Sarkozy maintains the accusations are part of a revenge conspiracy by Gaddafi loyalists because of his government's backing for the international military intervention during the 2011 Libyan civil war, which eventually led to the ousting and killing of the dictator. The proceedings are expected to last several months. If convicted, Nicolas Sarkozy could face up to 10 years in prison.
And for more, let's cross to Paris Central Courts. France 24's Claire Bacalin is there. Claire, what's the latest where you are?
Well, I've been in the courtroom this afternoon and not too far away from the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. He's sitting on some fold-down chairs next to 3 of his former ministers, Brice Hortefeux, Claude Guéant and Éric Woerth. They are all on trial alongside him. They deny the accusations levelled at them, which range from illegal campaign financing to influence peddling and even corruption. They are accused of being part of a system whereby money came from the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi all the way to Paris and all the way into the offices of the Interior Ministry, where also Nicolas Sarkozy was Interior Minister before he became the French President in 2007. Now, these 3 men, these former ministers of his, they deny the accusations. Of course, Sarkozy denies them too. And we've been hearing from their lawyers in the courtroom today, but also in recent weeks, saying there was no secret about the fact that France and many other Western countries, European neighbours of France, were trying to re-establish ties with Gaddafi. They were trying to bring Libya in from the cold, but that does not mean, and that absolutely does not show, that they accepted what could be millions of euros worth of financing, bankrolling Sarkozy's campaign. So strong denials from Sarkozy and his former ministers that they had anything to do with any kind of financing from Libya to Sarkozy's successful 2007 election campaign. And their lawyers will be arguing hard in the next few months in the courtroom to try and get their clients off the hook.
Yeah, investigative reporting has this all starting back in 2005. At the time, Nicolas Sarkozy is the Interior Minister under Jacques Chirac. And, of course, there's that startling moment where once Sarkozy is elected, Muammar Gaddafi welcomed to Paris with full honors, even though the Libyan leader had been, one of his right-hand men had been convicted in absentia in the downing of a French airliner.
Certainly, it was a controversial visit. Now, certainly in 2005, just to go back to that point, Sarkozy visited Libya, and that is where the argument that this pact of corruption would have been made between Gaddafi and Sarkozy, something that Sarkozy very strongly denies, that pact of corruption whereby Gaddafi would bankroll Sarkozy's election campaign. Now, when it came to 2007, when Sarkozy won the presidential election here in France, not long after winning that election, he travelled back to Libya. And later on that year, Gaddafi spent 5 days on a visit here in France, and he famously pitched his tent in the gardens of the Hôtel Marigny. So that's a residence that the French president can use. He can allow his VIP guests to stay in that residence. So certainly very much an image associated with this relationship that Sarkozy had managed to form with Gaddafi, the late Libyan leader. Now, since then, the lawyers for Sarkozy have said, well, it really was the diplomatic price to pay, because at the time Sarkozy has been trying to get secure the release of Bulgarian nurses and a Palestinian doctor who were being held in Libya. He did secure their release, and so it was a diplomatic game, and it was the price to pay for the release of these medics at the time. But certainly that image of Gaddafi's tent in the gardens of the Republic, as they're known, was very much an image that has been associated with this intriguing relationship that Sarkozy had with Gaddafi. Of course, it soured in 2011, and Sarkozy has said that he was the first Western leader to recognize the rebels as the new legitimate leaders in Libya, so the rebels who launched an uprising against Gaddafi. And Sarkozy was, of course, at the forefront as well of the NATO-led intervention to put in place a no-fly zone over Libya. So that relationship certainly soured in the next few years.
Claire Paquelin reporting live there from Paris Central Courts. Many thanks. Well, for more on this story, let's cross to Tripoli. Anas El Gomati is director of the Sadeq Institute think tank. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you for having me.
Just to pick up on the last point there from Claire Paquelin, reporting from the courthouse. March of 2011, when Sarkozy basically launches the attack on Libya, catching even the Americans by surprise. Did you at the time have the feeling that he was shooting at the guy he owed money to?
Not at all. I remember sitting with you actually in that studio in March 2011 watching Sarkozy bomb Gaddafi. I would have never have bet, watching 14 years later, Gaddafi bomb Sarkozy's legacy. It would be news to me then. It's still news to me now. It's still as shocking as it is. I think what's most shocking about it is that he was the first to turn, and to turn so with such passion and with such vigor. It was almost as if there would have been an ulterior motive, because France didn't support the Tunisian revolution in the same way at the beginning. Sarkozy didn't offer assistance to the rebels in Tunisia, the peaceful rebels and revolutionaries. He offered Ben Ali, at the time the late dictator in Tunisia, he offered him the support of France's gendarmerie. So this was not someone that was supportive of the broader regional dynamics. No.
How do you see this as different or the same as David Cameron's support for the rebels?
Yeah, I think we can go back even further than David Cameron. I mean, Blair went to Libya. He went to kiss the ring famously with the deal in the desert, and then it became a full courtship. Intelligence sharing, oil contracts that endured up until David Cameron. That went from the Labour administration to the Conservative administration, and then when the music stopped, the handshake stopped, and the bombing began. It was very, very quick. It was very brief, but I think this is obviously very different because we have a trail of breadcrumbs that lead right back through multiple middlemen in multiple figures that are not only indicted, like Saif al-Islam in the ICC, but also people like Shukri Ghanem, the former prime minister and the former head of Libya's National Oil Corporation, who didn't just have this in his diaries. This is someone that a year later, in 2012, was found dead in the River Danube in Vienna. So this is something that goes much, much broader than just a couple of individuals that are now standing in court. People have died as a result, or could have died as a result of this.
Yeah, French investigators able to find Shukri Ghanem's notebooks, which are believed to have documented payments. How airtight does the case seem, though? Sarkozy's lawyers say that there is scant circumstantial evidence. That's their claim.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're now living in a world where this is right up in front of the cameras for the whole world to see, and it's still something that has to go to trial because there is always plausible deniability when it comes to how these money is moved. These are not idiots. This is also a regime that for 25 years to 30 years that was under embargo moved money across the world to enable Libya to do business and sell oil. This was not a poor country when it was bombed in 2011. It was a country that came out of 30 years of sanctions for only a couple of years that had 156 billion, I think, in its sovereign wealth fund. Where did that money come from and how is it being moved all over the world? You look at today's Panama Papers, this is a regime that made financial crime an art, and an art that I don't think any regime in the world has today been able to perfect in the way that the Libyan regime had. But what is so interesting and intriguing about this is that there always are going to be smoking guns and breadcrumbs because the Libyan regime is the one that kept the receipts. And today, those receipts, at least here in Libya where I'm sitting, they are public knowledge. And all of those that are up for ICC warrants like Saif al-Islam and his cousin that sits today, or Gaddafi's cousin, the special envoy in Egypt, Ahmed Gaddafi, them, have gone on the record and said, we paid that money. They're happy to indict themselves in this. Abdullah Sanusi, who's also in prison only a few kilometers down the road, he has gone on the record in 2012 saying that he paid money to get himself off the conviction that he had, I believe, in 1989 for the bombing of the French aircraft.
Yeah, let's talk about this. Yeah. Just to remind our viewers, Abdullah Sanusi, brother-in-law of Muammar Gaddafi, head of intelligence services, who was sentenced in absentia for the downing in 1989 of that French airliner. And it appears as though there was an attempt in 2009 to get the French to lift the international arrest warrant for Sanusi.
Yeah, well, that 2009 meeting wasn't about justice. It was about its price tag. It's a convicted criminal that was convicted of terrorism, that was negotiating his freedom with the individuals and the courts that convicted him, with the government that essentially convicted him, and the victims or the victims' families that were still mourning while in Paris at the time. I can't understand what they must be thinking about the deals that were made. And this is also a country that came out of the cold in 2003 after it paid its billions of dollars in compensation for the Lockerbie bombing, again in the late 80s, the Pan Am bombing. So this is a full circle. It's shocking, honestly. It's shocking to see the level of moral duplicity that is at play, because the Libyans understood, or at least the Gaddafi regime, I don't want to call the Libyans for that. Libyans are immune from Gaddafi and from his crimes. But the international community and members of the French administration, the British administration, the Americans, all of the documents that have been seized over the last 14 years show that Gaddafi couldn't have done this alone. They weren't just buying favors. They weren't just buying immunity for individuals like Abdullah Sanusi. They were also buying spying equipment that was used to spy on people on social media that were arrested, that were murdered during the revolution. This is the way that international justice works. It's not about the search for justice. It's about understanding its price tag and understanding that what happened in 2005, in 2009, and again in 2011 is not about justice. It's about the blueprint, because that blueprint continues. Today, we see autocracies across the Arab world continue to do the same Gaddafi playbook and continue to do it over and over again. There are regimes that have murdered their way to power, continue to murder their way in Libya and elsewhere across the world, including individuals like Khalifa Haftar that sits in eastern Libya and is welcomed. His hand is soaked in blood, but I wonder who else's hands are soaked in blood after repeatedly shaking the same hands that have committed more murders since Gaddafi over 42 years, over in the last 10 years. It's a shocking story because no one has learned any of its moral lessons. Only the Libyans that sit here today are wondering, why is it selective justice when Gaddafi's name is mentioned and everyone else kind of keeps dancing until the music stops?
Well, Anas, what's the feeling where you are about the fact that it's going to trial, that a former French president is sitting in trial?
I'm glad that that's the case. I wish that was the case for Gaddafi when he was murdered in 2011. I wish that he had sat and been and held to account for the crimes that he committed against Libyans and against French innocent civilians, against British, American civilians, against German civilians, against Libyans that were living in diaspora and dissidence for the last 42 years. I wish that this wasn't supposed to be the symbolic case that I think it is. I think that someone that gets away with wearing an electric bracelet on his leg, that's not justice in my mind. That's a luxury detainment. I don't even know if Pablo Escobar, got as bad of a trial as Nicolas Sarkozy. So I don't think that we're going to get the semblance of justice. I think the real justice will be making sure that it never happens again.
Anas El Gomati, many thanks for speaking with us from the Libyan capital.